Whoops. There it is. Got it. Okay. So I'd like to introduce our critiquer today, David DesRochers, who is on my screen on the top middle. And he's going to be doing our critique. And now I'm going to say greetings to everybody. Glad you're all here. And I did want to do one quick heads up about next month's meeting. And that meeting is going to be a photo share. And the details, of course, will be emailed to you as we always do. But I wanted to just remind you to give your possible selections some thought as you process your images these next few weeks. And think about what you would like to present, whether it be a story or just individual images. But I hope you're looking forward to sharing your images with the rest of our group. Okay, so tonight we have the professional landscape conservation and all things nature and flower photographer, David DesRochers, who will critique our photographs this evening. And if you were at our last meeting, you would likely remember his excellent presentation on the many ways to create beautiful flower photographs. And of those techniques, many of his detailed teachings would also apply to lots of other photography subjects as well. But tonight he will be using his fine-tuned photographer's eye to review our images and help us see their strengths as well as the areas where those images might be improved. So our procedure tonight will be as follows. Rich Raphael, our tech specialist and member photographer, will be using Photo Contest Pro to display each image by sharing his screen. David will review and discuss each image, and he might also suggest ways to edit or improve the image. These insights of David's will represent his take on those most important elements of a successful photograph. If you have any questions about his comments, please enter them into the chat and he will address your questions at the end of the critique. When the critique begins, we'll turn off everyone's sound so we don't accidentally hear any uncensored conversations or TVs. And we would appreciate, as Mary mentioned, to turn off your video, which can also be a distraction. So it's presentation time, and I'll hand over the Zoom stage to the talented professional photographer, David DesRochers, and Rich, the man in charge of our anonymous images. And they will be anonymous tonight. Okay, David.
Okay,
and Rich, it's all yours.
I appreciate you turning off the microphones. The last time I judged, I want you to introduce you to my cat first of all. That's Minnie.
Oh, hi.
She likes to jump up on whenever I'm at the computer. She likes to lay down. She thinks I'm going to pet her. So for now, she's going to be on the floor. So anyway, somebody's mic was on it, and they had some very foul language that they used in order to critique my critique.
Oh,
So,
no.
Yeah, it was pretty disturbing. But anyways,
that's awful.
So tonight, I appreciate the fact that I don't have to give scores. People get very insulted when you don't give a good score. But I'm going to look at the images. I've looked at them already, and I've really gone in and I zoomed in, and I was like a surgeon. I was taking them apart, so I'm pretty familiar with all the images in that respect. And many. And so, and the fact that you do competitions, I'll give my comments as to what a judge might think. Of course, everybody's opinion is different. I'm going to give you my opinion on your image, and somebody might see it differently. So just keep that in mind. That my word is not final. There's other opinions about the work, but hopefully I can give you some ideas on how you can improve your images. Let's get the first one up.
Ready? So give me a second to get my screen shared here. Okay. There you go.
Okay. A couple of things on this one. I like the idea. I think the bee is looks like you've got some nice detail in the bee itself. I don't think you need. Come on, Minnie. I don't think you need this much space, however. and it almost like the subject is more of the flower with a bee on it as opposed to the bee. And that might have been your intention. But I think if the bee is your subject, then I would crop in a lot tighter on the bee itself. A couple of things I think you can do to improve the bee. You've got some black areas in here. So you've got, where all the black is, it's really dark and we're kind of losing detail on that. So in post-processing, I would go in there and just brighten up the black areas. And I use a program called Nick software, and there's a thing called structure in there. And when you put structure on a dark object, it brings out more of the detail. So if you're using Nick software, that would be a good approach. The other thing about this image is the background. I find the background distracting. The bright greens are drawing my eye to the background as opposed to looking at the bee, which is relative to the background, is kind of dark. So you'd want to brighten the bee up, darken, and I would also desaturate the greens. You don't need that intense green. I would desaturate the green, darken the green, and then go to the dark areas in the background and brighten those up. And the goal here is to try to get the tonality in the background closer together as opposed to having some bright areas and some really dark areas. And I think that would improve the image. Go on to the next one. Okay, great capture. I love the way the feathers are all kind of ruffled up. I photographed these guys myself, and usually their feathers are kind of smooth and laid down, but might have been a windy day. I think maybe one thing that I would suggest on this one is to select the sky, and I would darken the sky. I tend to do that on my landscape photos and my wildlife photos. I want the subject to stand out, so I'll take the sky and not darken it a lot, but darken it a little bit more than what you have here, because most of the sky looks kind of white, and that might have been maybe some clouds in the distance, or maybe you had some white clouds in the very far distance that are blurred out. But I would darken the sky, and I'd go right underneath the right next to the dark area next to the eye, and just brighten that up a little bit. A couple of the areas I think you have a couple of blown out areas of the whites on the top of the head and some of the feathers on the left side underneath the feathers. I think you can afford to try to tone those down. So this is a great image. It doesn't need a lot of work, but I think those fine tunes would help. The last thing I'd point out, if you look at the feet, you've got kind of a cyan cast to the feet. So what I would normally do in a situation like that was to select that area and either go to the hue saturation and just take the blue channel and the cyan channel and just turn them, reduce that color in that particular area. And that'll turn what's now appearing as cyan or blue, it'll turn it to its natural color. It's a very, very minor detail. Probably most judges wouldn't see it, but it's something that I pay attention to in my photos. If I see, and blue casts and cyan casts will appear in dark and shadowed areas. So if you look at a shadow area or something in shade, they tend to have a blue cast to it. So I usually like to try to get that blue and cyan out of the picture, unless of course it has an appropriate role. But very nice image. Go on to the next one.
Next.
Okay, great capture, great storytelling, great wing position on this. Your background is nicely blurred. A couple of things I think you can do to improve this would be on the wing closest to us. It's kind of bright, so I would go in there and just tone that down a little bit. If you're using Camera Raw or Lightroom, there's another control for a thing called texture. And what I normally do is I'll open the image in Photoshop. I will select the subject, and then I will open up Camera Raw from Photoshop and just go to that texture layer or texture slider and bring up the texture, and that'll bring out more texture in the feathers, both in the neck and the wings as well. So I would tone down the bright area on the front wing, and on the back wing, I would select that shadowed area and I would bring up the exposure a little bit, and that'll give you more detail in that area. The other thing I would do is I would, again, select the subject and then inverse my selection. So I have the background, and I would darken the background. And that'll help your bird or your great blue heron stand out more. And the last thing I would do is above the head, you have those two bright spots in the background. I would remove those, and because they do serve as a kind of a subtle distraction, because they're so bright and they're so different than everything else in the photo. But great capture, and I think if you do those minor tweaks, I think it would be even stronger. Next slide, please. Okay, great idea for silhouetting. But sometimes if the light's not working in your favor and it's late in the day and everything is dark, as opposed to trying to bring out detail in a dark bird, you're better off silhouetting it. And I think you did a nice job here with that. Now, part of the thing, as far as competition goes, you might run into trouble because a lot of judges that I know, and I'm sure you've experienced as well. There's a lot of confusion with all the different branches kind of intertwining with each other. So you've got a lot of clutter there. So one thing you can do to give more dominance to the bird is, number one, crop in a little bit tighter and try to eliminate. I don't think you need all that area on the left side. So I would crop from the left right up to the edge of where the top branch is, and that would give more prominence to your bird. I'd also come in from the right side, and instead of a horizontal, I think maybe a vertical might be more appropriate for this image. And then the last thing I would do is I try to take some of the sticks that are kind of merging with the bird silhouette, and the one above, if you look at above its head, you've got that one stick coming down going into the bird. You've got some other sticks that look like they're kind of going into the butt of the bird. I would try to, if you're good at content aware and using the healing brush, I would try to remove that so the bird is not sitting there with different sticks sticking into it and merging with the bird. And I think that would help the bird stand out more. And I think it would be a stronger image in that respect. Okay, next. Okay, great bird. You've got a nice, good full frame shot of this. A couple of things. I do think it's over processed. It looks very contrasty to me. It looks dark. It looks contrasty. It looks like the blacks are probably losing detail on the black part of the feathers. And then you can see the eye. If you go to the eye, you can see the eye's kind of getting lost in the indentation of the bird's head. So you can't see where the eye ends and the feathers start. So I would go in and select the eye and brighten that up a bit. You might want to go back and maybe start from the beginning, and whatever kind of editing you did that created that much contrast, you may want to soften that approach up a bit. I would also remove, you got a kind of a dark out of focus branch at the top. I would remove that. And then on the right side, you've got these little sticks, 3 little sticks just kind of creeping into the image. And whenever you look at your photos, I do what I call border patrol, and just look around the edges. And if you see something coming in from the edge that has no purpose in the overall photograph, I suggest that you remove them, because they do serve as a distraction. And the other thing I see here is the branch that the bird is sitting on. The bottom part is totally black. So, and again, that might have been over processing the image, may have lost detail there. So I would try to bring out some detail there, and so you can see more of the bark as you see in the upper part of the branch. Next photo, please. Okay, nice tight crop. Is there a way to, I'm wondering whether I'm losing something on the top of this. Is there a way to reduce the size in the screen? This one's
No,
going off
I
again.
can't, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay, all right. I'm gonna assume that we're right at the edges there. So you got a beautiful flower here. The water drops definitely add interest to the image. A couple of things. If what I'm seeing is the full picture, at the top, the petal at the top is kind of clipped off in that area. So in taking the photo, I would include, if that is part, if you're going to cut it and, cut a lot of it, but if you want to show that petal, I would show the edges. So you show that whole petal as opposed to clipping it at the top. Now, maybe the image is there's more to it, but on my screen, I'm only seeing the top being cut off. It doesn't look a tad bit over sharpened. You got some very harsh edges, especially around where you see all the whites. So go back and think about how you sharpen the image. You may want to redo it and not sharpen it as much. Another thing you can do to kind of soften images that look a little too sharp is in a camera raw, and I'm assuming Lightroom has the same thing. Go to the clarity slider and reduce the clarity, and that kind of gives us a very subtle softness to the image. And it actually, I think, in my opinion, I do it all the time. I feel it improves the image. It gives a more of a nice, dreamy quality to it. Not a lot, just enough to just take off the edges here a little bit. And then the last thing I would do is I would brighten the center of the flower, and then I would darken the leaves that are on, or the petals that are on the outside. And I think that would give you a nice strong image. But I do love the water drops. Really are they're doing the trick. They're really taking this image to another level. So nice selection. Next image, please. Okay, so when I first saw this image, it really grabbed my attention, and it grabbed my attention because to me, this is more of an abstract. It took me a while to figure out what it was, and then I, of course, went to the title, and that gave me my answer. So it's interesting in that perspective, but it's a little confusing as to what the subject is. So if somebody was to look at this and not see the title, yeah, I guess you can say that you can identify that back as the back of an alligator. And I do like the reflection, but I think I would have liked to have seen the head of the alligator presented in the same way, because as presented, it's very confusing. I think as far as a competition image, I think you may find judges agree with that and maybe not give you the score that you would like, because it's not readily clear what the subject is. And when you're in competitions, it's important for the image to come up and for immediately the judge to be able to identify what they're looking at. If they have to think about it and try to wonder what's going on, they tend to give low scores for that. So I love the idea. I think it maybe crop in a little bit and maybe just use pieces of this image as an abstract, and don't show all the background. Just show a small section of the of what you're seeing here, and you've got yourself a very interesting abstract. And I think that might be your image. But clever idea, and I encourage you to keep seeing things like this. Next, please. Okay, shooting up at trees is a good idea. In this case, however, I think you've got too many leaves. The leaves are the bunch of leaves on the upper right-hand side, or you've lost all your detail there. So it's almost solid black. And because there's so many leaves, there's not a very distinctive pattern. A lot of times when you try to shoot up at trees, you want to have some open space, and you want the leaves to create interesting patterns. But you've got so many leaves here that the tree, which is kind of interesting, is kind of getting lost in all that other leaves and the bright sky behind it. The bottom of the tree on my screen is totally underexposed, so I really can't see any detail there. And of course, because it's an important part of the tree, you'd want to see the detail there as well. I think the tree is kind of cool. And as I look at it, if you go up, it looks like at the top of the tree, the two branches are going up. One is thick and one is thin. And then in between there, I see a face. So I see a little face in there, and the guy with his hands up like this. So I don't know, maybe that's your photo, because it's kind of cool. But that kind of drew me up to that area, and I saw that, and I thought it was kind of interesting. But I think you need a cleaner image in order to pull off something like this. Next image, please. Okay, nice close up. I've never seen or photographed one of these birds. A couple things. Again, this is similar to the previous bird that I said was over processed. It's very contrasty, and there are some areas of the subject that are soft and out of focus. The eye looks like you're pretty close to focus, but it is a bit soft. So again, maybe take the original image, try to process and tone down your contrast that you're adding to the overall image. And then if you want to sharpen it up a little bit, I happen to use a program called Topaz Denoise or Topaz Sharpening. And both of those programs do a wonderful job sharpening soft images. And you might be able to retrieve some detail and sharpness from using one of those programs. Also, you can see the beak. The beak is definitely out of focus. And, so for a portrait like this, you definitely want the eye and the beak to be tack sharp. The other issue on this is there is a lot of noise in the background, and I would assume that there's a lot of noise in the subject as well. And that's where this Topaz Denoise would help reduce a little bit of noise in your main subject, because it has the ability to identify what needs to be sharp and what needs to have a lot of noise removed. If you look at the background, you can zoom in, or I can see it on my screen. There's a lot of noise in that background. So I think overall your image has a lot of noise, and using a denoise program can really help improve your images. And I tend to do that as soon as I open the image. That's the first thing I do. Because as you start processing the image, if there's noise in there, it just gets exaggerated. So you want to remove the noise at the beginning of your processing. And also the leaves in the background, they're bright green, so they are distracting. So, you'd want to tone those down, desaturate them, and darken the background as much as possible. But I think you got a good subject here, and I think if you use some noise reduction and sharpening software, you might be able to bring out a little bit more detail and come up with a stronger image. Next, please. Okay, so good idea. I like the idea that I'm assuming you were drawn to the grass with the drops of water coming off of them, and clever idea is a good spot, but unfortunately most of the grass and water beads are out of focus. So when I look at this image, the first place I go to is the bottom right. You can see the bottom right is very bright. It's out of focus, but it's very bright there. It's the brightest part of the image. And the eye will go to the brightest part of the image, the sharpest part of the image, or the image with the most contrast. So usually the common error I see a lot of photographers do is they don't take care of the bright areas that are not important in the photograph. So for this one, you definitely need to tone that down, but you would really need to, in capturing the image, really maybe move into a smaller selection and make sure that these are tack sharp. Because as a out of focus, maybe you're going for an out of focus abstract. I don't think it works. I think you really, because my eye can't really rest on any part of the subject that I feel is strong and interesting. Again, my eye goes down to the bottom right hand corner. So if you see this again, maybe grab a macro lens and just zoom in on a few blades of grass and try doing it that way. Next image, please. Okay, great storytelling, well captured. You handled the whites very well in here. Maybe the top of the adult's head is a little bit overblown, so you may want to go in and select that and maybe tone it down a bit. You don't want to do too much, because if it's off the histogram on the right, if you start darkening it, it's going to turn gray, and you definitely don't want that. But tone it down a little bit. Again, go back and use that texture feature in Adobe Camera Raw, and it might be able to bring out more detail in the feathers. Now, as far as the competition goes, I mean, you got a great storytelling here. The birds are handled well. A lot of judges don't like clutter, but this is where these birds live. You know, they live in the clutter. So I don't, personally, I don't have a problem because that's part of the nature story that you're telling. But one area that you might get really hit on is on the lower right. You've got all those out of focus green leaves or grasses or whatever they are. And a judge will definitely hit you on that one. So this would be very challenging to remove with content aware. And you don't want to crop up too much more from the bottom because you can see that you'll get a little bit too close to the birds themselves and you want some room there. So my only suggestion on this, I wouldn't do much different. But be aware that if you're thinking of putting this in competition, that bottom part is definitely going to be a negative for the judge. But in the future, again, sometimes you don't have a choice where you're standing. But if you do have a choice, move around and make sure you don't have anything out of focus in the foreground, because that's always going to distract from what you have here is a great story. Next image, please. Okay, beautiful flowers. I like the fact you have 3 of them. It looks like you have a fly on the flower. I actually have an image I really love, which is a flower similar to this with a fly on it. And I think the fly is beautiful. It's got some nice colors in it. But that's your story. So what I see here is this is a vertical shot, not a horizontal. The bright red other flowers in the background are very, very distracting. So we want to eliminate those. And one way to eliminate it is to make this a horizontal image. And then you'll crop a little bit on the left. You're going to have some of that red in the background on that side, and crop a little bit on the left, and then on the right, you're going to still have some of that little bit of red left. So what I would do is just go in there, desaturate the heck out of it, take all the red out, and make it dark, and let that darkness blend in with the rest of the dark area in the background. I would also take the bright leaves that are in the background, and again, darken, desaturate. You don't want them competing with the main subject. And then when you get to the flowers, I would probably just brighten up the center of the flower ever so slightly. Not the yellows, but the purple. Just bring, and you could probably add a little bit more detail to the petals, either by using that texture feature in Adobe Raw. Just try to bring out a little bit more. And then, of course, I would crop down from the top, so you're just above where the fly is sitting on that petal. And I think you would have a stronger image if you did a variety of things there. Next image, please. Okay, so nice background, nice out of focus background. A couple of things. As I'm looking at this, I'm more drawn to the flower that's open in the center. So what I would do is I'd crop in closer to that. So if you look at the flower that's open, then you've got 2 buds above it. And then you go to the left a little bit, you've got 2 more buds. That's where I would crop it. I would crop it there. I don't think you need that other leaf and those other buds. And some of the buds are being clipped all the way to the right or to the left. So I would crop it just beyond those 2 buds that are on to the left of the flower. And then I would crop it closer on the bottom and try to eliminate that one branch that's on the bottom right that's kind of going up and then out of the picture. So you probably cut, I would say, to crop it right where that one leaf is where that whole branch actually is coming out. You can see that green stem. I'd crop it just below there. I'd crop it in from the right, just up to that other branch that's kind of going up to towards the right corner. And then you're going to have a little bit of that one other branch left. And I would go in there and use content aware and just get rid of it. The other thing I would remove is if you look to the right of the overall branch or stem, you'll see a kind of a almost look like a triangle bright area in the background. It's out of focus, but it definitely stands out because it's brighter and it's got a distinctive shape. Again, I would circle that with a what do they call it? I can't think of the word, but I'd select the selection tool, the lasso. I would lasso that, and then I would just use content aware and remove it. So when you're looking at your background, this is really close. This background's really good, but also look for unusual like shapes that if you've got all this really nice soft background, then all of a sudden you've got an out of focus shape. You want to try to eliminate those. They're not very obvious, but some judges will look at that and they'll hit you on it. So just I would get rid of that as well. And I think you would have a much stronger image. I think it's tack sharp where it needs to be. And I think just a tighter crop would give you a nice image. Next, please. Okay, I do see something popped up. Can you crop that much? Won't you lose detail? It depends on what the image is. If you're taking it with a phone, yeah, maybe. If you're using a good camera and you're starting off with a big file, you can afford to crop in pretty close and still maintain detail. I have cropped some images significantly, as long as they were taken with a good camera. And then I use a program, I'm promoting Topaz products here because I use them all the time. But then they have a program called Gigapixel. And what Gigapixel will do is take an image that you've cropped, and then you put it in a Gigapixel, and then you plug in the size that you want it upsized to, and it will upsize the image. It'll give you that larger image back. And while it's doing it, it actually improves the image. It gives you a little bit more detail, removes any noise that's there. And so today with the software that's available, you can crop pretty significantly and resize. But the key here is to take the image with a quality professional type camera, like Canon 5D or Olympus cameras. If you're taking it with a camera that doesn't generate a very large file, then you may be in trouble. And of course, you always want to shoot in RAW. Okay. All right. Very dramatic photo. I love the positioning here. Couple of things I would do to me, this all this needs is some minor highlights and shadow adjustment. So the back of the bird, right behind the head or the shoulder, it's out of focus, which is okay, but I would tone that down a little bit. And then the area next to the eye on the left, kind of looks like a triangle coming down. That's a little bit bright too. So I darken that as well and try to bring out some detail in that using any number of tools. Either that texture tool in Nick software. There's a program called Detail Extractor, which is designed to bring out detail in bright objects. So that particular program would also work to achieve that goal. And then, of course, I would go into the shadow areas, the darker areas where the beak is pointing. And I'd brighten that up a little bit and add a little bit of more exposure in that area. And the final thing I would do, and this is for competition purposes, you've got a very dark background. So in Photoshop, you want to go up to Edit and then select Stroke. And first of all, you want to select the image. So you're going to use the marquee tool, select the whole image, go to Edit, Stroke, and then you're going to have the opportunity to put a thin line around the edge of the image, which shows the judge where the photo ends and where the background or the screen begins. It's called a stroke. You want it maybe, if you do it on the full size image, I usually do it after I size the image for competition. So you want maybe 1 or 2 pixels. You don't need it really big. You don't want to frame. You want to stroke, and it's about 1 or 2 pixels. And what that'll do is it'll give you a white line all around the edges of the image, and then that helps the judge to clearly see where the image is, how it's cropped and so forth. But this is a very strong image. I would definitely just try to tweak those highlights and shadows a bit, and I would definitely put this one in the competition. Next, please. Okay, again, great storytelling. The one thing that I'm questioning as I look at this, I'm questioning as to whether the sky was added to this image. And the reason I ask that question is if you look along the edge of the shrubbery and the trees and the plants behind, right along the edge of the sky and the trees, you've got this kind of bluish gray color all through that, which sometimes that's evidence of a sky being replaced. If I'm wrong, forgive me, but if you're going to put this in competition, you're definitely going to want to address that, because I have a feeling that most judges would look at this and think that the sky was added afterwards. If it was added afterwards, you may want to consider using the original sky or do a better job of replacing the sky. The other thing you could do, you are correct, how to redo. Okay, well, how to redo? Well, replacing sky, I don't replace skies. It's not something I normally do. I want to go with what was there. So I'm not really good. So what you could do is you would select the sky and then of the original image, and then you would select the sky that you want to use, and then you would kind of have to cut and paste to put it in there to replace the area that you selected. But it's important to select, and what you have here is you've got all these little very fine, almost like hairs coming up. So you have to refine that selection. And there's a way to go in to select and then refine the selection, and then it allows you to take a brush and go along the edges, and then it finds all the fine detail. So you just need a better job of selecting and replacing. And so, and that takes some, yeah, the sky was gray. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, and think about it, if the sky was gray, there might be some detail in there. And I have pictures that the sky is gray, but then if you use another great program I love using as part of the Nick collection is Color Effects Pro, and in there is a thing called tonal contrast. And then so tonal contrast, I would add the tonal contrast to the sky, and if there's detail in there, that's going to bring it out. So you may have a gray sky to the naked eye, but you add tonal contrast, you may have all kinds of cool textures and shapes in there, very subtle. And that's all you need, because you don't want people looking at the sky. You want people looking at the birds. So I think your gray sky, bring out maybe some detail in that using a tonal contrast adjustment layer. And I think you may have something there to begin with, because you want right now the sky is detracting from your subject. The subjects are the birds. The brightest thing in the image is the colorful sky. You don't want people looking at that sky. You want them to look at the bird. So I think the gray sky might be a better choice. Now, that being said, depending on how bright that sky is, you want to tone down the sky, make it dark as you can. Again, tonal contrast may add some detail in there. And then what you want to do is brighten the birds. The birds are very dark. I'm having a hard time seeing the detail. So you want to brighten the birds. So you want the birds to be the brightest part of the image. You don't want them over brightened, but you want them to be able to, the viewer, when they go to this image, you want them to look right at those birds. And another thing you can do to enhance that is to crop it tighter. I don't think this is a horizontal crop. This is a vertical crop, in my opinion. So you crop it vertical, you get rid of everything on the right and left, and now the birds are dominating your picture. So try that and see if that works for you. But again, play around with the original sky. You may have more detail in there than you can see on the, when you first look at the raw image. Next, please. Oh, I love kitty cats. So this is a very cute cat. I wouldn't put it in a wildlife competition. I know some of my cat's pretty wild too. But I wouldn't put it in a wildlife competition because it's a domesticated animal. So, but we'll judge it as far as it is. And I think it's a beautiful cat. You've got some nice detail in the fur. It's nicely exposed. I'm bothered by your background. Your background is very distracting. So one way to address that is to try to eliminate as much of those sticks or twigs or branches as possible on using content aware. And then areas that you really can't get into, just select them and darken them. So you want to pretty much have your background pretty much almost black. So try to get rid of as many of those branches as possible, and I think you'll do fine with it. I think it's doable. It's just going to take a little bit of work and a little bit of time to do it. But the cat's beautiful. I think it's properly exposed. Everything's working for you. If you can take care of that background, I think you'll have a good image. But don't put it in a wildlife competition because you'll get a disqualification. Next, please. Okay, great position. Looks like mating season's here, and the bird's trying to attract a mate. A couple of things here. So again, you've got all the sticks and branches and everything. That's where they hang out. That's part of the nature story you're telling. But be aware that judges don't like that stuff. They look for something to ding you on, and if you got a busy nesting area, they're going to ding you on it because the branches are kind of going through the bird. Judges normally don't like that. But as a nature story, just a regular nature image, it's good. This is something that would would be appropriate for putting into a book about birds. And so just keep that in mind. Now, a couple of things you can do to improve it, and part of this is what you're doing in the field. First of all, you look at the top of the beak is almost at the edge of that image. You really need a little bit more breathing room up there. And that's easy enough to do. You can use what's called content aware cropping. So you select you crop the image, and at the top there's a little box that says content aware. And then you take the crop and extend it beyond the top of your image, and it will add detail and content with the content aware algorithms, and be able to extend that canvas so you have a little bit more room on the top. So that's an easy fix. The one that's not as easy is on the bottom. You can see that the left foot is going out of the image. So when you photograph these, don't be so concerned about taking tight crops. I know a lot of judges love tight cropped image. Give yourself some breathing room. You can always crop it in later. And so back off, make sure you've got the feet in the image, even if you don't see them. If this bird was standing in water, you'd want to kind of imagine where the feet would be underwater and give yourself that room. So you want to make sure you get those feet. So just watch how close you assign your subject within the frame. A couple other things you can do to improve this. On the right side, you've got those leaves coming in. You can remove those with content aware. You've got these bright spots in the background, these out of focus bright white areas that look like bouquet, whatever they call it. You want to get rid of that. So just try to clean up as much as you can without ruining the overall image. I would darken the sky a little bit. You got some bright areas in the sky, so I would darken that. Again, darken the sky so that your bird stands out more. But I think you've got some potential with this image, and I just paying attention to those little details can be the difference between a good score and a or a not so good score. Yeah, as judges look for all those little details. Next image, please. Okay, you've got an interesting subject here, nice pattern shot. Two things are working against you here. Number one is the lighting. It's a middle of the day shot. So you can see all these black shadows that have absolutely no detail, and you ain't going to get that detail back. It's just too dark. And then the other thing that's kind of working against you is if you go into the center of the image, the center of that plant is out of focus. So when you're taking this, you want to make sure you have an aperture set that gives you depth of field in order to get everything in the image sharp. So it's kind of weird because it looks like the rocks or whatever, maybe this was on a lava field or something. They look sharp, and all the other leaves look sharp, but for some reason that center area, maybe it was the highest up and you didn't focus on that. It's probably closest to the camera. So when you're doing this again, focus on the closest thing, have an aperture that'll give you depth of field to get everything sharp. The other thing that you can do as far as the lighting goes, if you're doing plant photography and you're out on a sunny day, worst time to photograph, but you can bring a cloud along with you. And what that is I'm suggesting that you bring either a reflector or a diffuser. So in this particular case, if I had my diffuser, I was actually at a garden today in Brooklyn, New York, and it was very sunny like this. So I would use a diffuser, and the diffuser is like a round disc. The light, it's like a kind of a white membrane there, and it lets light through, but not harsh light. So it's like bringing a cloud. It's like if a cloud went in front of the sky or in front of the sun, all of a sudden all that contrast would go away because you would have nice, soft, even light. And a diffuser allows you to do that. So if you like photographing plants and so forth, I think I talked about this in my flower program the last time. Pick yourself up a diffuser, get something about 32 inches, maybe it costs you $30. You can fold it up, keep it in your backpack. And when you're faced with situations like this, you can manage that light a lot better. Next. Oh, the other thing too, you can also afford to crop this a little bit. Next, please. Okay, good idea. Now, again, I'm going to give you a judge's perspective. Most judges don't like out of focus elements in front of your subject. But for this photo, in my opinion, it works beautifully because it's so out of focus. So it kind of almost serves as a very soft framing of the head of the bird. And what I would do is I would tone it down a little bit, especially in the upper left-hand corner. You can see that bright green. I would tone that down, desaturate the greens a little bit, and I would probably crop in from the right side. You're not seeing a lot of the back of the bird, so truly make it a portrait. So crop in from the right-hand side, maybe up to, I wish I could show you on this thing, that right behind the head, right behind the head, and then crop up from the bottom, just below that leaf that's on the bottom of the screen there, and make it a portrait. Because that's pretty much what you've got. So there's really no need to show the rest of the bird that's being blocked by all that out of focus material. So try that. Lighting is good, detail is great, sharpness is right there. So I just think a tighter crop, make it a true portrait, and I think you can do well with this. Next, please. So if somebody was underwater doing this, I envy you. Yeah, the lighting on the whale is really makes, I mean, that's the whole story here. It looks like you're probably, if I'm not mistaken, you're probably underneath the whale. So by being underneath, of course, you lose the opportunity of capturing the eye of the whale, which would have helped to make it stronger, because if you get that eye of any wildlife creature, that always enhances the image. That being said, the lighting is very interesting. It really adds to the image. I would go to the bottom part of the whale that is very, very dark. And here again, brighten it up, add a little structure, add something that brings out some of that detail. And I think you would have a stronger image. And maybe probably check your levels. And so you go to the level tool in Photoshop and look at that histogram and check your white point and your black point. So when you see the histogram on levels, there's little triangles, and the little triangles should be right up to the edge of the histogram, both on the left side and on the right side. And that'll tell you that you have your true black and white point. And that will add a proper amount of contrast to the image. So I have a feeling that you maybe be a little bit off on that. So open this image up, look at your levels, bring those sliders right to the edge, and you might be able to enhance the contrast a little bit more, give it a little bit more pop. Next, please. Okay, great story. We have these ospreys down here up here in a place called Forsyth in South Jersey near Atlantic City. So we get to see these guys all the time. So you've got a good story. Unfortunately, I don't know if this was taken with a phone. I'm not sure what camera was used, or you really cropped this a lot. And again, depending on the quality camera you have, you can only crop so much because first of all, the subject is very soft. You have a halo around the bird. So if you look at the edge of the bird, you see there's some kind of a white line around it. And that usually happens when you over process an image or you start sharpening small files, or maybe if you cropped it down and then you started doing all kinds of work on it, it creates these halos. There's ways to remove it, but you want to try to avoid them right from the beginning. So you got a good story here, but the quality of the photograph is definitely lacking. So I would not suggest entering this in the competition. Go back and look at your images. Again, if you shot this in RAW, you might be able to salvage it. You may be using some denoising or sharpening software, but as it's shown now, it's pretty soft. Next, please. Okay, it's a great capture in time. I mean, you caught him doing something, just jumping on there, and that's pretty cool. I'm not too bothered by the out of focus wing, that shows the wing motion. But I can tell you some judges might really hit you on that one. That's a lot of judges who don't like anything out of focus in the foreground or in front of the bird. A couple of things I think you can do is to improve this. Number one, the background and I guess the material that the bird is landing on is very, very bright. All right, so you definitely want to select the background, darken it, reduce the saturation a bit, and then working on the bird, you can see that the bird, you lost the catch light in the eye based on the angle of the head. So there's not a lot you can do with it. I mean, there's ways to put a fake catch light in there. You may want to try that, but what you could do is maybe just take that side of the head and brighten it up a little bit. I think it's a good timing shot, and you caught it at a very unique time. Competition wise, you might have a little struggle with the out of focus wing, but definitely you want to darken that green and maybe desaturate it a bit and crop in a little tighter. I don't think you need that much room around the bird. Of course, you always want to leave a little bit more room in front of the bird than in back of the bird. Next, please. Okay, well, I can definitely see why somebody would take this image. You got, especially with the one bird, with the beak open. I'm not. It kind of looks like a red-winged blackbird to me, the silhouette, because of the way that tail is flared, but it might be another species. So I like the story. Again, this is an image that suffers with a lot of clutter in the branches and the leaves, and some judges might not like that. What you could do to minimize that a little bit is to crop up a little bit more from the bottom, maybe crop a little bit over from the left side, and just try to tighten up your composition a little bit. The other thing I would do is what I suggested on the last silhouette we looked at, is you've got these sticks, they're grackles, okay, bow-tailed grackles, okay, yeah, maybe right. So what you want to do is to get those sticks that, especially the bird on the left, you've got this long branch coming right out of her back. I would imagine that would be the female. You'd want to get rid of that. So try to get, if there's things like kind of sticking out of the bird, if you can eliminate this and have the birds, truly be silhouetted without all these lines coming into them, it would strengthen the image a bit. Sky is cool. You've got that alpenglow going on in the sky. Might be want to sharpen your moon up a little bit. The moon's a little soft. You can probably go in and just sharpen that up a little bit to make it look a little stronger. But you know, it was a good thing to see, and you know, it tells a good story. Next, please. Okay, so this one I looked at. You know, I did this on all the images. I zoomed in, and this was a little bit soft if you zoom into it. Yeah, from this distance it looks okay, but if you zoom in, it is a bit soft. So you could, you know, afford to sharpen it up a little bit. And there is some noise in the bird as well. And you'll find that noise will be more prevalent in darker areas than in lighter areas. That's why you know, one of the recommendations is always shoot to the have your histogram all the way to the right without going off the edge, so you can get as much detail in the dark areas. But if you don't do that, and you know the black areas are all the way down to the left, close to the edge on the left, it's hard to bring out that detail because number one, there's going to be a lot of noise in that area. So again, the topaz denoise would help this considerably. I would go in and darken the bright part of the upper of the wing on the top. Try to bring out the exposure in the bottom of the, you know, the underbelly of the bird, you know, around the head, and then again, you know, take that background and try to darken it a little bit. You might even want to crop in from from the right hand side, just to maybe you know, right to the edge of where all that moss is kind of hanging down. I'm assuming it's some kind of a moss. So you can bring a little bit off the right as well. But you know, the sharpness and the noises on this is a little bit problematic. And again, you know, keep in mind judges don't like busy backgrounds, and this is somewhat busy, but it does show the environment. It shows where the bird was. So as a natural history image, it works fine. But I would try to just work on the bird a little bit, try to get rid of the noise, brighten the shadows, darken the highlights. Next, please. Okay, so I like the fact that you got in close. You know the bee on that flower. That's your photo. And that's the story right there. Now, some of the things that are working against you here. Number one, at the top, you've got that out of focus branch that is in front of the flower. So that was something when you look through your viewfinder. Look around the edges, look and see what you're taking a picture of. And you're probably very excited to get this bee on this beautiful flower, and you probably didn't notice it, but it is a problem. You could probably, if you're good at content aware and cloning and removing objects, you could probably remove it. It's going to take some work, but you can probably remove that. But the key here is in the field, get it right in camera. So before you take the shot, make sure you don't have any distractions creeping their way into your photo. I would probably come up a little bit on your crop to eliminate that element on the bottom right hand corner. I don't think you need that. That kind of is working against you. And the bee, again, the black areas of the bee. If you look at your histogram, I would venture to say that a part of your histogram is pretty darn close to the left-hand side, which means it's hard to bring up that detail. So it's a tough shot because you've got a bright background, you've got bright light. The bee is kind of in shadow. It has a lot of black in it. So trying to balance those bright areas in the dark bee is challenging to do in the field. But if you're using a good camera and you're shooting in RAW, there's a good opportunity that you can go in and retrieve those areas in the dark areas of the bee. And that's one thing I would do, because it looks like it's pretty sharp. It looks like you've got some good detail there, but because it's so dark, we're kind of losing that. So you want to try to work on the dark areas of the bee, get rid of that out of focus area on the top, crop it up from the bottom, eliminate the bottom left right-hand corner. And I would probably brighten up the right side of the flower, the green area below the blossom, and brighten that up a little bit too. And of course, darken your background. Next, please. Okay, very strong image. I kind of like when I saw this, I like the fact that the head is just getting beyond that left, its right wing on our left side, just kind of peeking around that wing. So I think that's pretty cool. It looks tack sharp. You've got good detail. I don't have much critique on this one other than to maybe go in and select the breast of the bird and maybe the dark area of the wing so on the right side and brighten those up a little bit because they are a little bit dark. And I think if you brighten those up a little bit, they'll you'll see more of the detail there and have a nicer presence. But great capture. I'm not bothered by the out of focus on the back wing. I would attribute that to probably wing motion as opposed to depth of field. Some judges might hit you on that, but for me, I think it works fine. At the top, if you do look at the top of that wing that's outstretched, at the top feather, you've got this little white line going through that white feather or that top feather. I would eliminate that. It may be a break in the wing, I'm not sure, but it doesn't look like it belongs there. So I would just go in with a healing brush and just get rid of that. But very, very strong image, and I would definitely put this one in a competition. Okay. All right, so again, yeah, this is a strong image. I think it's a little bit over sharpened. Because if you look at the feathers on the breast, you kind of got these white lines, and I see that when you over sharpen an image, so you get that kind of a crunchy look to it. So I think this might have been over sharpened. So I would probably redo it and don't sharpen it as much. Because I think the basic image was probably pretty darn sharp right out of the camera. So I don't think you need a lot of extra sharpening of it. It looks like you probably did a little extra sharpening there. So I would redo that. Position of the head is good. You got a little catch light in the eye. The only other suggestion I have is the background. So you got two things that are really bothersome in the background. First of all, the bottom part, which is very, very bright. Now that's easy enough to select and darken. The other thing that kind of bothers me is above that and to the left of the bird, kind of in the middle of the picture, you've got what looks like kind of like a triangle shape going out of the picture. So where everything else is kind of very smooth, you got this identifiable shape. I mentioned it in an earlier image, and I would definitely try to get rid of that. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. Again, I use Viveza, and what I can do there is I can select that area, I can darken it, I can take the structure down, which then blurs it, and most of the time it'll disappear. If not, then you probably need to select that area and do a content-aware fill to try to get rid of that particular shape and try to draw from the rest of the background to fill that area. But if you take care of those two things in the background, redo it and don't sharpen it as much. I think you've got to. And the last thing I would say is that on the upper right-hand side, darken the bark of that tree a little bit. It's kind of bright. But I think you've got a good strong image here. Next, please. Okay. So compositionally, I like the fact that the subject is on a diagonal. So instead of being horizontal or vertical, you nice diagonal. That's I think very important when you're doing butterflies or moths and things like that. I think you can afford to crop in a lot more. I don't think you need all that area on the right side and at the bottom. So I would definitely crop in as much as you can. I did look at this a little closer, and it is a bit soft. It's not tack sharp. So again, this might benefit from a sharpening program, might be able to recover that. And of course, I would take the subject and brighten it up a little bit because it is a little bit dark, so we're kind of missing the detail. I think if you brighten it up, because again, you got an dark orange subject competing with bright yellow flowers, And so, the eye kind of goes back and forth between the two. So if you brighten up the subject, I think it would be a little bit better. But the main problem I had with it was the sharpness of it. So if you can get that sharper, it would definitely be to your benefit. Next, please. Okay, very dramatic shot. The eyes are beautiful. The problem here is the front of the beak is out of focus, and it really draws my attention to that part of the bird. So I love the idea, the concept of doing that close up, but you really needed more depth of field. So I'm not sure how far away you were, whether you used a really long lens to get this. Sometimes maybe if you're shooting birds, when I'm shooting birds, I'm usually shooting at like 5.6 or 7.1 or something like that. But sometimes if you're using a long lens, the long lens is automatically going to give you very shallow depth of field. So the couple of things you can do, you can either move back, because the further you're away from a subject, the more depth of field you're going to get. So maybe doing this shot with a shorter lens, maybe standing back further, would give you more depth of field than you possibly could have gotten the front of the beak sharp in the field. I'm not sure you can salvage that front of the beak using any kind of software that I'm aware of. It does also look a little bit over processed. Again, it looks a little bit too much contrast, a little bit too crunchy, and then the side of the right side of the head, you're right on the edge of blowing out the detail there. So you'd want to kind of bring that in. And again, if you shot this in RAW, you'd be able to retrieve the detail of the feathers there and not have them so bright. But I think the one issue here, the eyes are great, but the one issue is the beak. So maybe a possibility is just crop the left eye. You're gonna have to upsize this, of course, you're really cropping a lot out, but crop the left eye, leave the beak out altogether. Now you've got some really cool pattern shot. You may want to try fooling around with that, because then you'd have that orange thing above the eye. You'd have a tack sharp, beautiful eye, beautiful color, and a little bit of the beak, not the front of it, but a little bit of the orange of the beak, and then go off to the edge and go up, and maybe that's your image there, because I think that area is the strongest part of this photograph. Next, please. Okay, you got a nice arrangement of flowers. They look pretty sharp. Some of them are just starting to be past their prime. You can see kind of some browning along the edges. Ideally, you want to find a plant that's very, very healthy. It looks like some of these petals, especially the one on the one on the front right, looks like the petals are starting to decay. So choice of subject, you want to try to make sure you find the healthiest specimen around. So a judge might hit you on something like that. Background, I think you can afford to, you've got a couple of leaves on the upper left. You've got the bright stem. You want to minimize that, either remove them or darken them. And then in the inside of the flower, you probably, especially the one on the right, the front right, you want to brighten that up a little bit. And I think that just watch your backgrounds when you're doing this. Again, always look at your subject and look at what's behind your subject. And if there's something distracting there, you want to try to either change your position or find another subject. But I think you can do some work on it, and I think you can probably improve this with a couple of small edits. Next, please. Okay, very, very interesting capture. I know I do these guys when they land on the grasses and stuff, but I've never caught one flying. I'm almost wishing that the wings were blurred, had motion blur, so it looked like they were flying. They're kind of, they're not tack sharp because I think probably depth of field, but they're stable. There's no motion to them. I'm wondering what this would look like if there was motion in the wings. A little bit slower shutter speed. But that being said, I think you've got, you definitely have a athletic capture here. This is something that's not easy to do. So the photographer definitely has some skill in capturing this. A couple of things I think you can do to improve this is to go to the head and the body just beyond the wings and brighten that up. It's a little bit dark. I think you can afford to brighten that up a little bit. I'd go to the back, right where the tail begins. You've got that bright blue area. I would tone that down a little bit. And then I would crop it from the right, probably up to just beyond that dark area that's coming down. I don't think you need all that space. So, a tighter crop, I think, would make the subject stand out. But definitely, I applaud you for your skill on capturing this subject. Next, please. Okay, so another. Again, I applaud you for being in the water with these guys. Unless I'm not sure this is a aquarium type environment or whether you were actually diving in there. So that must have been a heck of a lot of fun. Part of, I think the other image like this was a little bit stronger because of the light. All that light on the body. So this is very flat. And again, this might be something you want to go in and look at your histogram, your levels, and make sure your white point and your black point are set. So you look at you bring up levels, look at the histogram, and make sure that little triangle on the bottom of the scale is all the way over to the edge of the histogram on both the right and left. And that's going to give you your true white and black point. And that, I think, would give this a little bit more contrast because it's kind of a little bit flat on the light. I mean, obviously, underwater, you don't have great light here. And it would have been nice to see the eye, but I don't think you're in the position where the eye is visible. I think, well, maybe it is. I think I see it. So you got the fin there. So it looks like the eye is there, but it's really in dark shadow. So if there's a way you can bring that out and actually make that eye visible, I definitely would strengthen your photograph a lot more. So, but I applaud you for being, getting an image like this. Maybe a little bit of tweaking might be able to make it a little bit stronger. Next, please. Raccoon. Okay. Well, I think that the green leaves on either side kind of make a nice framing element. I think again, this is another one I kind of zoomed in on. I think this is a little bit over processed. I think the contrast on this is a little bit too much. So like the bright area around the nose is almost blown out. There's no detail there. And then I don't see any detail in the fur on the dark areas around the eyes. And the other thing, when you get to the back of the animal, it's very soft. Above the head, you've got this kind of just blurry black stuff. Doesn't look like fur at all. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what it is. So I think the processing was a little bit over the top. The other thing too, and you can see it, that he's got this one paw at the bottom of the image. You clip that off. So you want to give yourself more room so you're not clipping parts of the animal. Again, if this was done with a shot and raw, I'd go back and reprocess this, and maybe you want to crop it a little bit tighter, because the body on the right hand side next, right to the right of the ear, it's out of focus, so it's not really helping you. And then you've got a very busy background beyond that area. So I would go in and I would probably crop this in and just make it a headshot. Get rid of the claw that's, the paw that's clipped. Get rid of the back of the body that's out of focus and has little detail. And of course, it'll minimize some of that background. So just make this a headshot. I would crop it right below, maybe maybe just above where the paw is. And so you got the head, and then crop all the way from the right and the left, right up to the ear, give yourself a little bit of room, to the right and left of the ears, and then come down to the tips of the ears, again, giving yourself some room, and make this a headshot. And I think that would be a stronger image. And then if you can, you've got all those sticks coming down into the head. If you use the healing brush, you should be able to get rid of most of that that's overlapping the subject's head. and I think you would have a stronger image. But it's a little contrasty. So I'd go back in and try to brighten up those dark areas and darken the bright areas of the fur and try to get more detail out of it. Next, please. Okay, these guys are fun to shoot. I cheated, and when I was reviewing the images ahead of time, I zoomed in, and so the bird on the lower right is the sharpest of the three. The other two, excuse me, the other three are a little bit soft. They can be salvaged using a sharpening tool like Topaz. But one of the issues with the back bird on the top is you clip the wing. So you want to try to avoid, clipping parts of bodies. So if you've got that there, you may want to consider removing that bird. And then you'd have three birds. Of course, you'd have two that are pretty far separated from the one on the bottom right. So, and a lot of this has to be addressed in the field. And there's ways to, select the bottom bird and move it closer to the other two. So if you really want to get, if you really want to break the nature rules, you can do stuff like that. But I think I heard that you folks don't like doing that kind of stuff. So, but it's possible. It's possible to do that. So if I was to go to that level, then I'd remove the top bird that was clipped, take the bottom bird, move it closer to the other two, and then tighten up your crop. There also seems to be, like, if in front of the one of the birds, kind of in the middle, you got this dark spot. I don't know whether that's a major dust bunny on your sensor, or whether it was something in the water. I'm not sure, but it does look out of place, and I would definitely remove that as well. Next, please. Okay, again, beautiful bird. I love the eye on this subject. I wish I could have seen a different angle, so I could have seen the beak actually in the feathers preening, which I'm sure this is what the subject is doing. The blacks here, the feathers on my screen, I see very, very little detail. So again, if you're shooting in RAW, you should be able to retrieve detail by selecting that area and brightening it with whichever method you are using. Because you definitely want to see detail in it, because right now you've got this big black area on the right-hand side where you can see the feathers on the edge, but inside the bird itself you can't see. So you want to brighten that black up a little bit to try to get as much detail, feather detail, as you can. The thing that's really hurting you here is your background. It looks like a man-made subject. Maybe it looks like a window or something like that. I don't know what the rules are down there, but in our nature competitions, if you have a hand of man evident in any of your nature pictures, it's disqualified. So, so the background here is really, really a problem as far as the overall image, not only for qualification for nature photography, for nature competition, but also it's very distracting from your subject. Because it's, again, brightest, one of the things the eye goes to is the brightest area in the image, and of course your background is the brightest area. So again, there's ways to change backgrounds if you're good at that stuff, but this would be very, very challenging because you've got all those feathers sticking out from the bird, and it would be very hard to make a selection around those areas. Next, please. Okay. So I fooled around editing this one, and I think you really improve it by bringing down your highlights, bringing up your shadows, and if you do that, you'll get detail on the top of the head and on the bottom feathers of the bird, and add, again, using something to add, try to get a little more detail in the feathers, again, using that texture feature in Adobe or Lightroom, or if you're using Nix software, the detail extractor is a way of doing that as well. When in the field, one thing I can guarantee a judge is going to tell you on this image is that you're shooting down on it. If possible, you want to be at eye level with the subject. So that means you probably have to get your feet and clothes wet and get right down to the water level and lay down and you want to get that straight on shot. And that's what judges love. They see that stuff and they go crazy. So judges like to look for excuses. And one of the favorite excuses, and it was mine too when I used to judge, is shooting down on the image. Because if you follow any bird photographers like Art Morris, they'll tell you that all the time. Don't shoot down on your subject. And you can see that you shot down on. Beautiful bird, well executed. So in its current format, I think if you just do some shadow highlight adjustment, add a little detail to the feathers, I think you have a very beautiful subject and representation of the bird. Next, please.
That was it.
Okay. We have any questions?
Hi, yes, thank you. You're really great critiquer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, you keep mentioning competitions. I'm not sure how many people here are submitting images for competition, but what kinds of competitions would you suggest for some of the better shots?
Well, I was really referring to club competitions. I thought that your club did do competition. You have, Photo Contest Pro, so I'm assuming you do competition. So I was referring to club competitions where you'll bring an outside judge in and judge the club members.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's what I was kind of referring to. I mean, there's a lot of international competitions. I've entered many of them and never heard from anybody. So I gotten a couple of winners here and there, but the national competitions are just extremely competitive. You're dealing with professional nature photographers from around the world, and it's almost impossible unless you're a professional and really serious on yourself.
right.
Nature's Best is like one of the big ones, but I've gotten to the finals a couple of times, but never got into never won anything. But very competitive, very competitive.
Your work, by the way, I'm sure several of us have looked, but your work is exceptional that you have on your website.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We used to, David, we used to have competitions a couple of years ago. And that's why we have the Contest Pro app.
Okay.
But we use it for other stuff. We decided not to do competitions.
Okay, that's good. It's good.
But
Yeah.
it can't hurt for people to know in case they are interested. My impression, though, is from people that are in competitions, is you can't remove much stuff at all.
Well, yeah, that's correct. So if you're going to do like Nature's Best,
Yeah,
you can't remove anything, because what they do is they ask for the raw image. And
exactly.
if the entered image is different than the raw image, you're out. So yeah, I just thought because you had Photo Contest Pro, I assumed you guys were doing competition. So that's
In the
why I kept
past.
referring to that.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
It would be wonderful to see you actually edit a few photographs, not tonight, obviously, but at some point, it would be very useful to all of us, I'm sure, to see how you make some of the edits that you were suggesting.
Okay, well, I do offer a program called Wildlife Photography Editing Techniques. I do one for landscapes, and I do one for nature, for wildlife. So if you want to bring me back sometime, I'd be happy to present that. So it's all my programs are on my website. But that one, I developed both of them around the same time. I usually get requested for the nature. Actually, the wildlife I have that scheduled for sometime in the next few months. But again, I would take, I would demonstrate a few of my images, and then I would take the club members' images and I would edit them. They would have to send me the raw image, providing they shoot raw. If they shoot JPEG, then I'll work the JPEG image. But I definitely encourage everybody in this club, even if you're not a professional, you're not real serious, if you can shoot in raw, if you're able to edit, then start with a raw image, because you are going to get so much more data from a raw image versus a JPEG image.
So you do have a date for, I don't remember the club, I'm not on your site now. You have a date on one of the clubs where you're doing an editing presentation. Can we join that if we click on the link, or or no?
That would be up to that club.
Okay. All right.
Do you offer that presentation through Hunts, or is that just through you separately?
Either way, either way.
Yeah.
Do you do any private?
Yeah,
Training?
Hunts gives me a lot of, they're great to work with. They've been very kind to me. They've helped me get a lot of speaking engagements, but no, people come to me directly all the time. I just got a gig tonight from somebody who saw me on another program. And so yeah, you can contact me directly. You don't have to go through Hunts.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Really excellent feedback.
Okay, any questions from anybody? I'm looking at the comments. I got a lot of thank yous and I appreciate that.
I have one question. I use Lightroom. I don't use Photoshop yet. And there are new tools where you can select the subject, and sometimes it's good, sometimes not so much.
Mm-hmm.
And they select the background, select sky. But one of the things I've found frustrating is when you have a bird that has, if you will, when their wings are out and you have that, like the fingers at the end, what's in between those fingers doesn't change.
It does, I know, that's a chronic problem. So what you can do then is take the quick selection tool and then hold the, once you have your selection, hold the shift key down and then start clicking those little areas and it'll extend the selection into that area.
Oh, really?
Well, that's how I do it in Photoshop. I don't know how Lightroom does it.
I don't know either yet.
But they probably do the same. They probably have a quick selection tool there. And then if you hold the shift key down, it just extends it. You hold the alt key down, it removes selection.
Huh.
So give that a try.
Okay.
Another option is to, depending on the sky you have, sometimes you can do a color selection. So if you have a pretty similar color in the sky, you can do a color selection. And I find that color selection works better in scenarios than like select subject or select sky sometimes.
I don't know whether it has that. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments? See if there's anything in chat. Oh, we have a bunch of things in chat. Oh, there it is.
I think we covered most of it.
Yep. Except that there's a lot of compliments.
Oh, I don't mind seeing that.
Um,
I'm trying to think of questions since you're here. And we have you. I use Photoshop primarily. I thought Lightroom was mostly for organizing files. And
Oh, no.
became
Lightroom's gotten, well, Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, they're basically the same program.
right.
They just look different. But from what I understand, Lightroom is pretty much do most of everything in Lightroom. I have a photographer I know does most of his work in Adobe Camera Raw.
Right.
Because you can do so much with it. There's selection tools now, and so you can do. I'm so used to using Nick software, like Viveza and Color Effects Pro that I don't see any reason to change. I've been doing it for so long.
But
But
like you
every now and then I try something different and just go back to what I know.
mentioned Topaz, which has wonderful stuff, and also DxO. You're familiar with that, I'm sure. The
Yeah,
AI.
that's the Nick software. Well, I use the DxO Nick products, Nick
So
software. But yeah, if you're interested in Topaz, you can do me a favor and go to my website and go to my store page. And if you click on the link to Topaz from there, I get credit for anything that's purchased. So I don't push it that much, but I work on club members' sympathy. Help me out.
yeah, I can't imagine. You've been shooting a very long time, I imagine.
About 20, probably 24 years. I started out late. I was like, I think I was just turning 50 when I started.
Would you share what equipment you use?
Pardon me?
What equipment do you use?
Oh, I use a Canon 5D Mark IV. I've got the 24-105. I've got and then that's kind of my landscape kit. I use that for landscape. I also do a lot of multiple exposure type work, and the Canon's the only one that give me 9 exposures. So I also have an Olympus camera, and I use that for wildlife. I use it because it's a lot lighter, and it's got some really good features like pro capture and stuff that you just can't match anywhere else. So I use Olympus for wildlife. I use
Which model?
the EM1, I think, Mark III. I think it's the EM1 Mark III. There's a Mark IV out now, so they made improvements on that one. But
And there's their OM1, which is what I went to from a Mark III.
yeah. So I use that, and then of course I've got the 100 to 400 lens, which is actually 200 to 800. You can handhold it, and it's just change it. Oh, I used to walk around with the 500 millimeter Canon lens. I had to have a tripod with a gimbal head. Now I can do everything handheld.
On the Olympus, your 100 to 400, do you use 2 times, or is it a crop sensor? I mean,
It's a
why
crop
did-
sensor. It's a crop sensor. It's
Okay.
a 4/3 sensor. So 100 to 400 is actually a 200 to 800 on that camera body.
Do you do much black and white in digital cameras now?
I do some. Depending on the subject, I'll play around with it. I like color, but I'll fool around with black and white. Sometimes an image works better as black and white, and I'll do that. But I don't do a lot of it.
Clyde Butcher is down here in the Everglades. I went out to
Oh,
see.
I visited his. I was down there a few years ago. I visited his gallery. He's very impressive.
Oh, his work is amazing.
Yeah.
It really is.
We should do a field trip, Nancy.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll consider it. Maybe you can organize one. Yeah, I think it's over in Venice, isn't it? His gallery? Is it in
He's got
Venice?
2 galleries. One's right in the middle of the Everglades at Big Cypress.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a nice trip. You go, there's like a drive that goes through there.
It's only
And
about
the
2.5
scenery
hours.
there is beautiful.
Yeah, gorgeous. And then up in, I was talking with one of our members here, David, forget, Scott, up in Blue Cypress Lake.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, amazing.
That's for the osprey.
The ospreys. Yeah.
It's gorgeous. And when you go in season, when they're nest building, it's just remarkable. It's, I think, considered one of, if not the largest breeding areas for osprey in the country.
David, do you print much? And if so, how and where?
I have a Canon printer, I think the Pro 10. And so I can print up to 13 by 19 is the largest paper I can print on that. So if I want it that size, I do it myself. Otherwise, I'll send it out. I've mostly been using Bay Photo. And I'll print on metal. I've tried some acrylic prints I wasn't too thrilled with, but I love metal prints. So I'll print on metal.
Yeah,
I use either Bay Photo. There's another Adorama. I forget they changed their name to something else. They're up in New York.
Or Adorama, did you say?
Yeah,
Change their name?
Adorama Pix. I think Pixar or something, Pixel or Pixma. They changed their name recently, or about a couple of years ago.
Just the print section or?
Yeah, just the print.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Bay's kind of expensive, but when you get their specials, it can be. Okay.
Yeah, I look for the specials that I jump
Do
on.
you, on your website, do you, since I saw you were speaking and critiquing, I looked sort of briefly, do you sell your prints on your site?
I can. I have them. I have some prints on Fine Art America. I've sold some there. I have another one called I forget the name of it off the top of my head. It's a European company, Art Store or something like that. I've got selected prints there that I've sold. I have images on 2 stock agencies, Alamy and Dreams Time.
What is that?
It's a
Um,
cat. Oh,
Yeah,
Look,
I mean, you can't make, unless you're famous, you can't make money on stock anymore.
No, no.
But
I know that.
the way I figured it, it's better than having to sit on my computer and not doing anything. So I upload, thousands of images to these stock agencies. And with Dreamtime, they don't pay a lot, but every couple of years, every year or so, I get $100 out.
Right.
So it's better than nothing, and it's nice to know that somebody appreciates my work enough to buy it, even though they're only, not paying very much for it, but at least I know it's being used.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends in the 80s and 90s made a lot of money on
Oh, and
stock.
stock back then when you're shooting film, yeah, then it was a big, but there's so many people photographing now. There's so much work, and a lot of the buyers are not that particular. I did sell, I have one sale in the works. Company's going to buy they're an interior design company. They're buying having one of my images printed, really, 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 really big. And I started looking around for printers that can get the size they want. And I found Whitewall, which is one of the world's premier printers. But the size they wanted, it's like $4,000 to print it.
Wow.
You have to do this big scale thing. So they're looking for another printer. And I told them, I'll give you the image, I'll sell you the image, and you have it printed any way you want. So I quoted them a fee for just the artwork, and then they'll pay the expense to have it printed.
Great. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
I've sold some stuff. Sold some
I'm sure,
prints.
of course. No, your work was really good. Look, your work is really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you for
David,
coming.
where did you say that you had your metal prints done?
Bay Photo in California. Bay Photo in
Yeah.
California.
I
Yeah,
see.
they're expensive, but very good. I've got about 6 or 8 of my shots around the house.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's expensive.
Check it out. Really? Yeah, I have almost no prints.
It's why a lot of my
These days.
friends who are taking great shots, they're not printing them, and they should, because it's so wonderful to see it.
Yeah. It's
Do you guys
just
do
that-
any exhibits or anything as a club?
No.
Yeah,
Not
that's what
yet.
you gotta, yeah, that's something you want to do. We have a lot of, I was a member of a nature club for several years, and every year we would do a print hanging at one of the Somerset County Municipal Building. So, if you can go around, be part of Audubon, I'm sure they have an Audubon center with gallery space, and you should see if you can work out.
That we
exhibit.
don't have that.
Oh, we should.
A couple of years ago, we used to actually have a room where we had meetings, but COVID changed everything. And now that we're on Zoom, we have access to speakers from all over the country,
Yeah.
which is,
Be
we're
nice-
spoiled now.
be in-
Like to go
nice to
back.
in-person meetups though, Nancy. I live in a gated community, and there's a space here. I wonder if I could would we be able to do a meeting here? Or-
Oh. As I said, we would lose the ability to have presenters from all over the country.
Oh, you wouldn't lose it. You could just make
Yeah.
that another option.
Yeah,
Yeah.
present them.
Some Zoom, do some in person.
Have a projector. You could project them and all that. Well, anyway.
Well, it's something to think about, and
Yeah.
I think in our next meeting, we're gonna save some time for us to have a discussion like that, make
Okay.
suggestions, what would we like to do for the following year? So we'll definitely, don't forget to bring that up.
Are you guys familiar with Roman Kerchak?
I'm sorry, with what?
His name is Roman Kerchak.
No.
Yeah, okay, so he's a friend of mine. He used to live up here in New Jersey. He moved to Florida a couple of years ago. He does workshops, and he's doing a lot of stuff in Florida now. So he's really, really good. So if you wanted to get a club outing together, I'm sure you can contact him. He might be able to help. He lives up, not sure where he lives. I think he's on the West Coast. If you go to my website and look for Roman with Roman is his company name.
Roman with Roman?
Yeah, so if you click, you'll see a link to his website there, and you can contact him. But
What's his actual last name?
His last name is Kerchak.
Can you spell it?
I have to look it up. I forget. I gotta get my cat out of the way. Hey, bye, Minnie. Hey, bye, Minnie. Hey, bye. Hey, hello.
That's a handful of kitty there.
Oh, yeah. And this, she just started doing this recently. A couple of months ago, she started climbing up. Let me just,
How
as a
old
matter
is
of
she?
fact, here's what I'll do. Let me go. I'll get you the link and I'll put it in your chat.
That would be awesome.
Okay, let me just
I was
find.
curious, David, where in New Jersey are you?
I'm in Somerset County. It's
Okay.
it's
I
kind
know
of
it
like
is.
in the middle of the state.
Yeah, no, I go back and forth between Bergen County, Audubon, and Everglades in Florida. And
Okay.
yeah, do you do any presentations in Jersey?
Oh, yeah, I do. Again, a lot of clubs are doing it all on Zoom, but
Uh-huh.
I did some presentations for the Burnage Township Library, along with a friend of mine, Phil Witt. We teach a series of photo workshops for New Jersey Audubon and at the Sherman Hoffman Wildlife Sanctuary. And we do that
Okay.
from September to May every
Uh-huh.
year. And of course, all the proceeds from that, we do it as volunteers. So all the proceeds of that go directly to Sherman Hoffman. So we've been doing that for like almost 12, 14 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I'll be looking for you there.
Okay, yeah.
Gonna go back to Cape May in May. I hear that that's a great birding spot.
Oh, yeah,
There
definitely.
in
Kate.
May,
They-
yeah.
You know, Jersey Audubon's got a head, I think a center down there. Phil and I actually did presentations at their birding events a few years back.
Mhm.
All right, let me get this for you. Hang on. Cat move.
I love that. What kind of dog is that?
It's not a dog, it's a cat.
Oh, it's a cat. Oh.
The
Big
cat,
cat,
the big cat.
big fluffy cat.
I didn't see.
Okay.
I didn't see his face.
All right, let's see,
Okay.
chat, where are you chatting? Type message here, here it is. Okay, that's his website. Then you can go see how he spells his last name.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Yeah, so you know, he's down there, he does workshops all the time. He does stuff with internet, he has trips to Africa and national parks, so he's been doing this for about maybe 15, 20 years. But I figure he's in your neighborhood, you should take advantage of him, he's really good.
Well, we're East Coast, and if he's West Coast, it's a distance, but it's definitely worth. I mean, he may do a Zoom for us.
Oh, he does those too. You know,
Yeah.
Does workshops.